Let me welcome you all to a most unusual seminar talk. I'm Ashutosh Varshney, director of the Saxena Center for Contemporary South Asia and professor here at the Watson Institute and in political science. And I'll chair this session and moderate it after the talk has been delivered. If you think of three most popular public activities in India, public activities, I'm not talking about private activities, we have no data on that. If you think of the three most popular public activities in India, what would they be? A fair proposal, a fair hypothesis is that it would be, or there would be, politics, cinema, and cricket. Challenges to this proposal, hypothesis are welcome during Q&A. And cricket, perhaps for the last few decades, I'm not sure about cricket versus hockey, field hockey in the 50s or 60s. Perhaps hockey was popular. I don't have the data, but certainly, since I came of age, cricket quickly replaced hockey in North India, where I grew up in Delhi. And cinema here, I'm not talking about Bollywood alone. Regional cinema is a phenomenon. That we have very good data on. Of these three, politics, cinema, and cricket, politics, if anything, is overstudied by social scientists. Cinema has also attracted considerable scholarly attention, though more surely would be welcome. Scholarly attention, not just popular attention. Sports in general, and cricket in particular, remain under-analyzed. And if cricket is among the three most popular public activities of India, we, the social scientists, must pay attention to it. Our speaker today, Ramachandra Guha, we know him as Ram Guha, has already written a well-known book, A Corner of a Foreign Field, The Indian History of a British Sport, published in 2002, and chosen by The Guardian of London as one of the 10 best books on cricket ever written. One of the 10 best books on cricket ever written. That book's focus was on Balu Palwankar, a Dalit cricketer, called untouchable at that time, untouchability at least legally outlawed, is outlawed now after 47, who exhibited his remarkable talents as a bowler, as a spinner, in the 1890s and 19-teens. First in Pune, then in Mumbai, Bombay then, as an untouchable, quote unquote. He could not have meals at the team's dining table or drink water from the general water service or general water fountain. Among the current day cricketers, we know that Yuzi Chahal is Dalit. We know that for sure. And the new star of Indian cricket, Rinku Singh, the interview he gave to Rajdeep Sardesai suggests something akin to that, though we have to do more research to figure out what the background is. He was asked, what did he do before he hit these 5 sixes in a row? In the last over, Kolkata Knight Riders, KKR, a week ago, had to make 28 runs to win, which means at least 5 sixes, or some combination of 6s and 4s. First ball went for 1 run. Next 5, he had to hit 4 sixes, and a 4, he hit 5 sixes in a row. Rinku Singh, the only job he could get in the town of Aligarh, where I spent 3 years of my teenage, in the town of Aligarh, he said to Rajdeep Sardesai, the TV commentator, not commentator of cricket, but a newsreader, he said, "Mujhe jhaadu poche ki naukri mili thi." To translate that, it's basically a sweeper's job in the company to which I applied. And my focus was on cricket, he argued, and my father's focus was my education. I couldn't go beyond the 9th grade. And I kept playing cricket, much to the displeasure of my parents, and ultimately Kolkata Knight Riders picked me. And now here I am, and Rajdeep Sardesai concluded that interview by saying, "Now you're worth crores. You were worth 50 lakhs when you were bought by Kolkata Knight Riders." He said, "I don't even understand crores. I don't understand crores. I just know that when I got an opportunity to play for KKR, and last year I did very well, the first thing I did was to make a house for my parents in the city of Aligarh, but they haven't moved into that house yet." Just an interesting story about the current day social issues. He wrote about social issues of the 1890s and Ram. Most of Ram Guha's work is not on cricket, of course. He is a prolific scholar and a prolific public intellectual, especially through his columns. His books intersect several fields, especially history and environment. And his monumental India After Gandhi, which all of you who've taken my class have read, and others also have as a text, his monumental India After Gandhi is not arguably, unarguably, incontestably the best book on the contemporary history of post-47 India, post-independence India. And was chosen as a book of the year by The Economist, The Washington Post, The Wall Street Journal, and the book of the decade by the Times of London and the Hindu in India. He's also a leading biographer of Mahatma Gandhi, and all of us have learned a very, very great deal on Gandhi from Ram. Ram was last physically at Brown 10 years ago to deliver the Jindal Distinguished Lectures in this room, and at our center and at this institute, Watson Institute. He has been with us virtually in a couple of webinars since then, and he's physically here once again, and let me welcome him to the Saxena Center and to the Watson Institute. And the topic today is sports and the nation. It's actually upon my request. I said this is underanalyzed and we need to have a serious social science analysis of sports now, of cricket, given what's happening. Sports and the nation, cricket and the making of modern India. Welcome, Ram.
Thank you, Ashu, and thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to be back at Brown. I spent a delightful week here a decade ago, giving a series of talks, but meeting colleagues, faculty colleagues, students. And it's a charming and beautiful town and a great university. And it's really nice to be back here. So I'm going to structure my talk, which is on the place that cricket has played and continues to play to use Ashu's phrase, in the public life of India. I'm going to structure my talk by posing a series of questions and seeking to answer them. So the first question, as a historian you must start in the beginning, is how did cricket first take root in India? Well, it came with the British, and they started playing this sport, which was previously unknown to India, because of their homesickness. If you can imagine, colonialism is generally understood and represented in today's world as a brutal, exploitative, dehumanizing political and economic system. But if you think of individuals who are part of that, process, yeah.
Is the Lagan story true?
We'll come to that later. Yeah. But if you think of individuals who are manning the colonial system, they were human beings like you and me, missing home. Just as some of you in this room must be, dying for Indian food, good Indian food. Particularly the food from the part of India you come from, the English were missing their homeland, so they started playing cricket. So they brought cricket to India, and the first Indian community to take to cricket were the Parsis, who were the most westernized. In the city of Bombay, where Parsis dominated economic and cultural life, they saw the British playing. They were also the least, shall we say, limited by caste or religious prescriptions about playing in the open. So in the great Bombay Maidan, which was the fort area of Bombay, they saw these English people playing and they started emulating them. And soon they had a club of their own. And other communities took to the game through a process of competitive emulation. So after the Parsis, it was the Hindus and then the Muslims. And though cricket clubs took birth in other parts of India, in Calcutta, for example, in Kerala, interestingly, one of the first cricket clubs is the Tellicherry Cricket Club, which was founded in the late 18th century by British soldiers. Though cricket was played in other parts of India, Bombay became the epicenter of the game. And the first competitive cricket tournament in India was played in Bombay. The young people in this room have grown up with the IPL. People of Ashu's and my generation grew up with the Ranji Trophy, which was played between states and was played over 3, 4 and 5 days in the traditional format, and also gave birth to passionate loyalties. So I am a lifelong supporter of Karnataka. And though I'm a historian who's written many books on important events and personalities, the only time I actually saw history being made in the flesh was when I saw Karnataka beat Bombay for the first time, and which was in 1974. So, and we grew up with these loyalties, passionate loyalties. Bombay versus Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu versus Karnataka, Delhi versus Punjab, in the North Zone. So, but well before even Ashu and I were born, there was a third tournament, which actually, another competitive cricket tournament, which gave birth to Indian cricket as we know it. And I'll say a little bit about that tournament which was played in Bombay. In 1895, about 100 years after cricket had come to India, the British granted the Parsis the privilege of an annual match against them. So the Parsi 11 of the Bombay Presidency would play against the British officers of the Bombay Presidency, and this was known as the Presidency match. 12 years later, by which time a whole slew of cricket clubs manned and staffed by Hindus had started in Bombay. This two-sided match became a triangular competition between the Parsis, the Europeans and the Hindus. In 1912, the Muslims joined in, and this became a quadrangular. Now, you may ask, why is it that cricket took root on the lines of community? That, of course, is largely because of social prescriptions. You hung around with members of your own caste, with members of your own religious group, as indeed still largely happens in India. So you had this tournament which started in 1912 and ran till 1935. It was granted first-class status. It was played in the Bombay Gymkhana, the grounds of the Bombay Gymkhana, which still stands. and it was watched by crowds of over 20 to 30,000 people. And though the matches were played in Bombay, the teams were chosen on an all-India basis. So in the weeks preceding the quadrangular tournament, you would have trial matches in which the aspiring Hindu cricketers from south, north, east, west, aspiring Muslim cricketers would come to Bombay to try out for their respective 11s in the Bombay quadrangular. So, for example, interestingly, a great source of talent for the Muslim team were the cricketers of the Aligarh Muslim University. So there is an interesting, backstory to this. Likewise, Hindu cricketers came from Saurashtra, which was from the princely states of Saurashtra and so on. And these, in a sense, you can think of the Bombay quadrangular as the IPL of its time. Intensely covered in newspapers. We are talking about a time when there was no television and radio, and the main vehicle of communication was the newspaper. So a match played in Bombay would be covered by the Tribune of Lahore, the Amrita Bazar Patrika of Kolkata, the Hindu of Chennai, and other papers, not just in English, but in all the languages of the subcontinent. There was also live radio commentary. Many of you follow IPL and the various channels, so there was live radio commentary on these matches. So even competitive cricket began with the quadrangular, and fans' loyalties were also put in place through this tournament, which existed well before the Ranji Trophy, let alone the IPL. Now, the format of the quadrangular, Europeans, Hindus, Muslims and Parsis, was still not capacious enough to reflect the religious diversity of India. It so happened that by this time, some Indian Christians had started playing cricket, and rather well too. And one of the outstanding Christian cricketers of this time, the mid-30s, was a man called Vijay Samuel Hazare, who later on went on to be the captain when India won its first ever test match against England in 1952. Hazare could easily have played Hazare could have participated in the quadrangular if only they had changed the nomenclature and redesignated Europeans as Christians. But the prejudice of race was so strong that the Europeans would not allow Hazare into their team, although in every club match in Bombay he was scoring hundreds. So to accommodate people like Hazare, in 1935, a fifth category was, a fifth team, like a new franchise, shall we say, a franchise, Bombay franchise was awarded to a team with the wonderful catch-all name of the Rest. And in the Rest, it is recorded that though most of the members of the Rest were Indian Christians like Hazare, of different denominations, at different times, Sri Lankan Buddhists played for the Rest, and so did a couple of Bombay Jews. I mean, there's a name, it's a scorecard of what was now the pentangular, no longer the quadrangular, is the name of someone called Ezekiel, who's obviously a Bombay Jew and could not play for any of the other teams. By this time, the tournament was so popular that it needed a new stadium. Now you can see some things you think are utterly new, you can see have a very distant origin. They need a new stadium. So to accommodate the larger crowds, the Brabant Stadium and the Cricket Club of India came into being in 1937, shortly after the quadrangular became the pentangular, and this housed the matches. Now, as cricket took root among the different communities of India, as Indians themselves became more proficient in the game, how did the rulers view this? How did the British view the spread of cricket in the Indian subcontinent? They saw it as unifying and cementing their rule. when King George V became King of England in 1901, I beg your pardon, when Edward VII became King of England in 1901, to celebrate that event, a team of Oxford cricketers came touring India. And one of the members of this team, called the Oxford Authentics, was a writer, a historian called Cecil Headlam, and he wrote an account of how cricket was developing in India. And he said he placed cricket in its proper context as, in his view, among the last and most benign influences of imperial rule. First the hunter, the missionary, and the merchant, wrote Headlam. Next the soldier and the politician, and then the cricketer. That is the history of British colonization. So I repeat, first the hunter, the missionary, and the merchant. Next the soldier and the politician, and then the cricketer. That is the history of British colonization. And of these, just give me 1 second, it's rather hot here, so I can just take this off. So, let me repeat. First the hunter, the missionary and the merchant. Next the soldier and the politician. Then the cricketer. That is the history of British colonization. And of these civilizing influences, the last may perhaps be said to do least harm. The hunter may exterminate species. The missionary may cause quarrels. The soldier may hector. The politician blunder. But cricket unites. As in India, it unites the rulers and the ruled. It also provides a moral training, an education in pluck and nerve, and self-restraint far more valuable to the character of the ordinary native than the mere learning by heart of a play by Shakespeare or an essay by Macaulay. So that's how the British saw cricket, and cricketers. So cricketers were, in other words, the finest, the kindest, the most humane, and the most enlightened of all the different forms of white European influence in India. Now, so the natives learned cricket, and those who, people like Headlam saw this as cementing and unifying British rule. But the question was, Indians could learn to play cricket, but could they win? Now, for a long time they couldn't. And there is a record of a match played in Bombay in the 1860s between two teams, and these teams were designated as officers with umbrellas versus natives with bats. So that was the handicap that was given to the natives. But of course, they could play and they could win. In 1890, a team of Englishmen came out to play in India, and they played against a Parsi team that defeated them. So that is why the Parsis were granted an annual match in 1895. In 1906, a representative team of Hindus was granted the opportunity to play a representative team of Europeans, and they beat them. And so the Hindus were then granted, their team too. And by this time, by about 1910, cricket was solidly established in the cities and towns of India. So that's how cricket came. That's my brief answer to my first question. How did cricket take root in India? Now I come to the second question. Who was the first great Indian cricketer? And Ashu has anticipated me a bit here, but let me give you more details about this man. Now, in the history of cricket literature, the answer to this question, who was the first great Indian cricketer, is usually, the name that is usually offered is that of Ranji, K.S. Ranjit Singh Ji, who was a prince from Kathiawar, from Nawanagar, played for Cambridge against Oxford in 1893. Again, this is absolutely fascinating story. He goes up to Cambridge, but because of the color of his skin, is not granted a net. He's not allowed to turn out for the team. And he plays local matches, and then word gets around that he's scoring 100 in every match. Finally, in his third year, he is chosen for the Cambridge team. He is the first person of colour ever to play in the annual university match between Oxford and Cambridge. And 3 years later, he makes his test debut for England against Australia and scores 100. And in the years to follow, he is the leading scorer in the county championship and is acknowledged as a truly great batsman. His nephew, Ranji's nephew Duleep, also played for England and also scored 100 in his first test match. Now, however, neither Ranji nor Duleep ever played cricket in India. They may have played the occasional knock-up match, but they played no representative cricket in India. And more importantly, Ranji always insisted that he and his nephew Duleep were English cricketers. He disavowed his Indian identity when it came to the game of cricket. So the first great Indian cricketer was not a prince, but a Dalit, Palwankar Balu, whom Ashu mentioned. And his story is utterly fascinating. He was born in 1875 in the town of Dharwad, which is now in Karnataka, but was then in the Bombay Presidency. And his father worked in an ammunition factory. Now, the military provided means of social mobility for Dalits. You will recall, I'm sure many of you know, that Ambedkar's father was a sepoy in the army. So the British Army provided some means of mobility for Dalits. So Balu escaped from Dharwad, went to Pune, where his father was working in the ammunition factory, and we don't know how he developed an interest in cricket, but he did so quite early on, and he joined the Pune club, which was a prestigious whites-only club, as a groundsman. He would lay the wicket, mark out the crease, mow the grass, and so on, and occasionally bowl in the nets. And he started bowling in the nets to a famous English cricketer called J.G. Gregg, who had played for Hampshire in the county championship. While Balu was working as a groundsman in the Pune club, across the river, you had the Pune Hindus trying to make their own cricket team. And they heard of the prowess of this chap, who was a fine bowler. And so they asked him to join their team, which he did. However, on the condition that Ashu has specified that he could not have tea with them. In the pre-IPL days, tea was a sacred interval. And when play broke for tea, Balu could not enter the pavilion. He was given his tea in a disposable cup so that no upper caste would touch that, that piece of crockery again. But he was a fabulous bowler. And the Hindus needed him to beat the Europeans. The match of 1906 that I mentioned, Balu got 11 wickets. And the key turning point was when he got his former mentor J.G. Gregg stumped by a wicket-keeper called Sheshachari, who was an upper caste Iyengar from Tamil Nadu. And this victory of the Hindus over the Europeans was celebrated in nationalistic terms. 1906 is around the time of the Swadeshi movement, the first major mass upsurge against British rule. And I found a clipping in the Tribune of Lahore about this 1906 victory. Think, the match is played in Bombay, and where is Lahore? And the Tribune says that this victory of the Hindus over the Europeans on the cricket field is a great Asiatic victory. It's comparable to the victory of Japan over Russia on the battlefield that had happened the previous year. So that is what Balu was, was kind of contributing to the emerging Indian nationalist consciousness. In 1911, the first All India team tours England. Though they are not granted a test match, they play a series of first-class matches against different counties. In this team are Balu and his younger brother Shivram, who was an all-rounder. The team was captained by the Maharaja of Patiala. Inevitably, it has to be an aristocrat who was the captain. But on that tour, Balu got 150 wickets. He was already 35, but he got 150 wickets. He was offered contracts by several counties, which of course he could not take. And what is striking about this, what is striking from a political or sociological point of view about this tour is that when the team returned, there was a felicitation for Balu held by the Depressed Classes Association of Bombay, and it is at this felicitation that B.R. Ambedkar made what was possibly his first public speech, felicitating Balu. I mean, this is documented by no less a person than the great historian of the Dalit movement, the late Eleanor Elliot. So, Balu was by far the first great Indian cricketer, but he could not be made the captain of the team. The captain had to be a Brahmin. Again, in the course of my research, I found a report of the 1913 quadrangular when M.D. Pai, a batsman and a Brahmin, had been chosen captain, and Pai's caste association, the Gaud Saraswats of Bombay, held a felicitation for him, and in the news report it says that Balu responded, I beg your pardon, Pai responded to the felicitation by saying he was grateful for this party that his caste association had thrown for him, but in his view, Mr. Balu should have been the captain, being the senior and the more experienced player. Now, it's a very kind of euphemistic way of saying Balu could not have been captain because he was Dalit. So he was never made the captain. Meanwhile, Mahatma Gandhi returns from South Africa. In 1920, Gandhi announces, early in 1920, while he's planning the non-cooperation movement, Gandhi announces that India would be fit for Swaraj only when they abolish untouchability. In November, the 1920 quadrangular is held. Balu is not only not made captain, he is dropped from the team. And his two brothers, by this time another brother called Vitthal, who was a wonderful batsman, were also playing for the Hindus. Vitthal and Shivaram go on strike. And they issue a fantastic statement, which is quoted in full in my book, Column of Foreign Field, explaining the reasons why they went on strike, where they say, that how could the prejudice of caste come in the way of appreciating the great talent of their brother, who had contributed so much to Indian cricket, especially Hindu cricket, for so many decades. Now, this story has a happy ending. In 1922, the quadrangular is held in Pune. Vitthal and Shivaram are dropped. A team largely composed of Brahmins, plays under the Hindu label, is defeated by an innings by the Europeans. This prompts a play by the well-known Marathi playwright R.R. Mama Varerkar on the pernicious influence of caste on cricket. And the next year, 1923, by this time Balu is too old, he's in his late 40s. The next year, 1923, when the tournament returns to Bombay, Vitthal and Shivaram are reinstated in the team. Vitthal this time as captain. And this is really a fairy tale ending. There's a final against the Europeans. Vitthal scores 100. They win the match. He also, in the second innings, hits the winning boundary. And when the victory is accomplished, he is carried off on the shoulders of upper caste Hindus saying, Mahatma Gandhi ki jai. Now, this is an absolutely extraordinary episode in the history of not just of Indian cricket, but in the history of Indian social reform. And it's a precursor, since I'm speaking to an audience in America, it's a precursor to the much better known story of Jackie Robinson. But sadly, had been obscured and forgotten till I wrote about it some 20 years ago. So that's the second question. Who was the first great Indian cricketer? It was not a prince, but a Dalit, the left-arm spinner, Palwankar Balu. The third question, when did cricket become a mass sport? By the 1920s, you had the reproduction of the Bombay quadrangular in different parts of India. So you had a comparable tournament in Calcutta, in Madras, in Karachi, in Lahore. We're speaking of undivided India. And the great Indian cricketer following Balu was a batsman called C.K. Naidu, who was from the Andhra country but worked for the Maharaja of Holkar and played in Indore. In 1926-7, the first official MCC team came to tour India, and they played against an All India 11 at the Bombay Gymkhana. And in this match, C.K. Naidu scored 153 with 11 sixes. So it was, someone mentioned Lagan, but this is really, an emphatic kind of assertion of, you could say, Indian cricketing prowess against a very good English team with some high-quality cricketers like Maurice Tate, who was the best English fast bowler of his time. And again, if you see the reception of C.K. Naidu's innings, it's very revelatory. There was a subscription made up for him by the workers of Parel, the textile workers of Parel. They contributed, a rupee each to buy a motor scooter for C.K. Naidu. Not just a motor scooter, as the report said tellingly, a motor scooter with a sidecar. Some of you will remember the motor scooter with a sidecar. So the working class of Bombay embraced Naidu, and so did the elite. So while the working class of Bombay was raising money to buy Naidu a scooter, the elite were holding a music concert. And the singer at this concert was Hirabai Barodekar, the great Baroda vocalist, Agra Gharana vocalist, whose father was a Muslim and whose mother was a Hindu. So C.K. Naidu was the first great nationalist hero. Balu was not really, possibly because, here I must confess to a prejudice, which is in favor of bowlers. Bowlers never get their due. If they did, Anil Kumble would have been captain of India for at least a decade. Bowlers never get their due. They are paid less. Today they come in fewer commercials. Very rarely do they get, person of the player or person of the match award. And I think among the reasons Vittal was made captain was that he was a batsman. And among the reasons C.K. Naidu, like all of you remember Dhoni's great six also in Bombay. A six is such a kind of dramatic act of conquest, of affirmation of your sporting prowess, that after these 11 sixes against the best English team of the time, C.K. Naidu became a great nationalist hero. Now, meanwhile, to move from the 1920s to the 1930s, by this time, cricket had got drawn in to the politics of the time. It already had become part of the social reform movements of the time. Balu also, by the way, I should say as that side, purely through cricket alone, was elected to the Bombay municipality. So he was the first Dalit legislator in the Bombay municipality, merely because he was such a great cricketer. But by the 1930s, Gandhi's movement to unite India and bring about the end of colonial rule was encountering a hurdle in the growing inability of the Congress party to attract Muslims to its fold. And the Muslim League was growing in prominence. Jinnah comes back from England in 1934, assumes the leadership of the League, and now you see clearly two major political parties in contention. And now the whole existence of the quadrangular becomes problematic. Because if there is a Muslim team, surely there should be a Muslim nation. And progressive nationalists of Bombay start a campaign to abolish the pentangular, the quadrangular and the pentangular, on the grounds that it was furthering the communal divide. And Gandhi issues a statement in 1940 about this. Gandhi, by the way, had a magisterial indifference to cricket. Gandhi is known to have watched, I think, one film in his life. Ashu mentioned film and cricket as two great popular passions. Gandhi is known to have watched one film. But he never watched a cricket match. And in the 97 volumes of the collected works, there is only one reference to sport, which is a statement about the Bombay quadrangular, about the Bombay pentangular in 1940, where he says that the nationalist public of Bombay has drawn his attention to this tournament played on religious lines, and such divisions on caste and community are inimical to the cultivation of a unifying Indian nationalism, and the tournament must stop. But this tournament kind of staggers on. It's boycotted, then it stops, then the war comes, and by 1945 it has died a natural death. So by the time India becomes independent in 1947, cricket is indisputably India's most popular sport. Since 1947, it has of course grown in leaps and bounds. It has breached the divides of class, so it is a game followed by Indians of all economic classes. The divides of region, so even the Northeast, previously not very keen on cricket, now produces some very fine cricketers. The divide between town and country, it began as an urban sport, but it has now permeated deep into the countryside. The divide of gender, it was a male sport watched mostly by males, or almost wholly by males. Now, if you look at the IPL, or even well before the IPL, female spectatorship and fandom was increasing steadily, and of course the quality of Indian women players too. And now, of course, there is also a women's IPL, and even in terms of reporting on the game, some of the best writers on Indian cricket are women, such among them Sharda Ugra. So all the divides that existed in Indian society, age, gender, class, caste, region, town, country, all these, cricket has transcended them. It's not a game, at least in terms of its spectatorship, its fandom, not who plays, which is a separate question, where perhaps there is still a upper caste domination. But in terms of who follows it, talks about it, debates about it, grieves about it when their team loses, exults when their team wins, it transcends all the conventional cleavages in Indian society. So I now come to my penultimate question. Why have Indians taken to cricket? Why has this quintessentially English game become so important in our country, in my country? And not just in my country, the whole subcontinent. I mean, one could talk about Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka in similar terms. Now, there are probably broadly four reasons, why Indians have taken to cricket, to the British game. The first, I think, has to do with its origins in the cities. Cricket can be played in this room, in a gully. Whereas football would need a larger field. Cricket can be played on mud, on gravel, whereas tennis would need a properly maintained court. So I think that's one reason, that cricket can be played indeed with umbrellas. You don't have to have a proper bat, you can play with umbrellas. So I think the urban context and the simplicity of technique means that anyone can play cricket, particularly in the cities, with whatever equipment is there at hand. A second reason might be, and this applies more to the pre-IPL era, is that physical prowess and athleticism are not that important. It is really a game of eye, hand and wrist. I mean, if you think of even the great Tendulkar, is not a specimen of, what do you call it? He doesn't look like a Greek athlete, like a Greek god. And if you think of some of my personal heroes, I mean, I've already confessed to being a partisan of Karnataka, and I come from an era where the two greatest Kannadiga cricketers were G.R. Vishwanath and E.A.S. Prasanna. Short and fat, and middle height and fat, middle age, and hopeless fielders, by the way, both of them. But a fabulous bowler and a fabulous batsman, respectively. So physique is not that critical. It's really hand-eye coordination and wrist work that matters. The third reason I think cricket has taken root in India is the structure of the game, which resonates with our chatty, conversational, and clubbable temperament. You bowl a ball, then you go back. You bowl a second ball, then you go back. Then the over ends, then you change. Then after 12 overs, there's a drinks break. After 12 overs, there's lunch break. I'm talking the traditional game, right? And then the day's play ends, and the whole evening and night and the next morning, and we can discuss and converse. I mean, contrast the episodic, interrupted, staggered, slow pace of a cricket match with Federer versus Nadal. Viewing Federer versus Nadal is an individual experience. Viewing even an IPL match, though of course now it's abbreviated and the game is played in a more intense way, is a collective, a shared experience. It's with your friends, it's with your family, and I think that's an important reason for why cricket has succeeded in India. And finally, apart from the simplicity of technique, apart from the fact that you don't have to be a great athlete, apart from the fact that the structure of the game is slow and staggered, it's the only game in which we are any good. So nationalism, I think, is one reason why cricket has taken root in India. It's the only game which we can actually beat the world. Now, one can understand the social history of cricket in India, which I've tried to do so far in my lecture, through 5 master categories: race, caste, religion, nation, and finally market. In my book, which was published more than 20 years ago, I dealt with race, caste, religion, and nation, but not really with the market. But I think a future historian of Indian sport or a sociologist of Indian sport will have to talk about, what cricket has meant in the age of economic liberalization. And IPL, of course, is very much part of that story. And cricketers are, to go back to a point that Ashu alluded to, cricketers are now, in my lifetime, I have seen cricket become much more important than film. And cricketers much more glamorous than film stars. The kind of tipping point was probably the 1996 World Cup, which was sponsored by Pepsi. And the Pepsi ad alternated between Shah Rukh Khan and Sachin Tendulkar. Even a decade previously, there was no cricketer remotely comparable to Amitabh Bachchan, who was the great hero of his time. By 1996, they were on par. Today, Kohli and Dhoni are far above, certainly in terms of advertising and so on, right? So, and of course, precisely for this reason, politicians seek to attach themselves to it. Earlier this year, we had the, how do I put it? I've tried to search for the proper word. We had the, I'm sorry, though I normally don't stutter and stumble in my search for words, I am now. We had the, let's say, hopefully never to be repeated spectacle of a man going to a cricket stadium named after himself and accepting a photograph of himself. All right. Now, and yet, the association of politicians with cricketers and with cricket is not new. And it cuts across party lines. Mr. Ashok Gehlot, who is very likely in his last year as Rajasthan Chief Minister, has ensured that in the meantime, his son will take over Rajasthan cricket. So, and Amit Shah has done, with the BCCI. In earlier generations, you had Sharad Pawar, Madhav Rao Scindia, and so on and so forth. And that's a sign of how significant and important cricket is. That powerful and moneyed politicians want to get some reflected glory from associating with the game, in whatever way. Okay, now, I'm going to, before I come to my last question, I would just say a little bit about the administration of the game, the global administration of the game, which is point to something which disturbs me deeply, but regrettably does not disturb most other Indian cricket fans. And this is the hegemonic imperialist role played by the BCCI in the running of world cricket. So if you look at, if you track the history of international cricket, the first test match is played in 1877 between England and Australia. From 1877 to 1977, exactly a century, England was the imperialist hegemon in the running of world cricket. The game originated in England, the laws were first framed in England, and the Maldives Cricket Club, the MCC, their laws were sacrosanct. Meetings of different countries were held there. What is now the International Cricket Council was originally the Imperial Cricket Council. And of course, the first 3 World Cups were held there. And they laid down the norms, the rules. They claimed their umpires were the best. They claimed, that only they knew how to run this game because after all, they invented it. So from 1877 to 1977, England was the imperialist hegemon of world cricket. From 1977 till about the advent of the IPL, Australia became the hegemon of world cricket. In 1977, you had Kerry Packer, who broke away and started World Series cricket. And of course, among the contributions of World Series cricket was first-class telecasting. So we should be grateful for that. High-quality telecasting and replays from all angles and so on. But now the Australians were running the game, and it suited them because they also had a very good team. So every winter, in December and January, Australians would not tour from November to February. Visiting teams would go there, usually to be slaughtered by Waugh and Vaughan and McGrath, and before that Border and so on. And the media would exult. There would be accusations about Australian umpires as cheats. They would be repudiated. And the whole game was run from Australia. And now, in the last 2 decades, it is India who is the indisputed hegemon of world cricket. I think this is bad for sport. English domination of how the game was run, structured and administered was unhealthy. So was Australian domination, and so is Indian domination. We can talk about it if you wish in the Q&A, but I want to just flag this point. Now, I'm going to end my talk with on a lighter note by asking, who are the Indians who hate cricket? They are actually Indians who are indifferent to cricket. Some of my closest friends don't like cricket. But there are some Indians who actually dislike the game and or have historically disliked the game, not just today, but over a longer period. As I said, for about 100 years now, cricket has been India's most popular sport. For 25 years, probably for at least 25 years now, not just our most popular sport, but our greatest popular passion. Now, there was a time when some economists disliked cricket. I think there's some economics majors here. And I think they would grumble about what would happen to the GDP when India is playing Pakistan and, 200 million people are not showing up to work. Right. So I suppose some economists might think that cricket is bad for India's GDP. The second group of Indians who dislike cricket and actually have a credible case are the promoters of other sports. There is so much emphasis and focus on cricket in terms of fandom, spectatorship, commerce, patronage, television coverage, that we've neglected other sports. I think, including at least individual sports at which Indians excel, such as chess, preeminently, but also at different periods in our history, badminton and wrestling and so on. And I think Aslam Sher Khan, the great hockey player, who was a member of the last Indian team to win a World Cup, Hockey World Cup in 1975, ended his autobiography with some very bitter reflections on how the dominance of cricket had led to the neglect of hockey. And I remember him saying saying interestingly in that book, with bitterness, but with some truth, that Indians like cricket because it suits their temperament, their conspiratorial temperament. 11 guys trying to get one guy out, trying to fix one guy. All right. Now, but that may be, but okay. So, but they have a case. I think all of you will agree that far too much emphasis is placed on one sport as compared to other countries. I mean, America has 3 or 4 major sports. Australia has 3 or 4 major sports. England, all great sporting nations don't invest all their emotional and cultural and economic capital and political capital in one sport alone. Okay. The last group of Indians who used to hate cricket now no longer do, but I should say not to them as a historian, are the Anglophobe nationalists. In 1946, in the course of my research, I found that in 1946, a prominent congressman called B.V. Keskar wrote an article in the Blitz Weekly of Bombay saying, cricket should quit India with the British. And he said it's a foreign sport, we should nurture our own games. And of course, that line of thinking among a certain kind of Indian politician was not unknown. M.S. Golwalkar, the long-time Sarsanchalak of the RSS, detested cricket because it was foreign, because it was English. Ram Manohar Lohia, the visionary socialist thinker, detested cricket, along with detesting the English language and Jawaharlal Nehru, which he saw as a package, those three things. And I'm going to end with a story about Lohia, which was told to me by one of his disciples. This is an incident from the winter of 1960-61. A Pakistani cricket team was playing 5 test matches in India. And all 5 matches were drawn, by the way. But a member of the Pakistani team was the great defensive batsman Hanif Mohammad. And again, I have 5 minutes. I can tell a couple of more stories. Okay. I should tell you people about Hanif Mohammad. Hanif Mohammad was a little fellow, that high, right? And he was a fabulous defensive batsman. He once batted 2.5 days to save a test match against the West Indies, in the West Indies. And Sunil Gavaskar, no less, tells the story of his coach, Vasu Paranjape, telling him, teaching him Hanif Mohammad's defensive technique. And Vasu Paranjape told Sunil Gavaskar, when Hanif Mohammad played forward defensive at the Brabant Stadium, the sound of the bat hitting the ball could be heard at the Churchgate railway station, right in the middle of the bat. Now, so Hanif Mohammad was a great hero even among Indians. So here's this match in the Brabant Stadium in 1961, India versus Pakistan. And Ram Manohar Lohia decides to call a press conference in which he outlines a series of complaints against the maladministration of Jawaharlal Nehru's Congress Party. And he calls it at 4 o'clock, which at that time was, right now, as you know, our Prime Minister likes to appear at prime time at 9 o'clock. That's when announcements are made. In those days, you called a press conference at 4 because the journalist would go back to his newspaper, file his copy, have it edited, have it laboriously typeset on the old-fashioned printing press, so that it came out at 5 a.m. So 4 o'clock was when press conferences were held. So Hanif held a press conference in a hotel called Swagat, right out opposite the Brabant Stadium. And he talked about Nehru's policies, how they were westernized, how they discriminated against indigenous people, and how this love of cricket was all part of this kind of Western colonial conspiracy to keep India down. And of course, Lohia, by the way, was a wonderful speaker and writer in several languages, including Bangla, not just English and Hindi. And the journalists had got their copy, and they were happy with what Lohia had said. They went off, and when everyone had gone away, Lohia, and when there was no one except Lohia and one or two of his acolytes left in the hotel, Lohia came out of the hotel, crossed the road, went to the Panwala, where a radio was playing. The commentary was coming on the radio. And Lohia came, asked for his favorite pan, 120 Kanoji, and then said, "Kya Hanif out ho gaya kya?" Thank you.
I can see hands already. Oh, sorry. Who called now?
That's called bold first ball.
Sorry. Yes. I'm sure. Is it about Lagan? No. Yeah. I'll come to you in a moment. Just a minute. At some point, let's start with questions from the audience. At some point, let's also discuss IPL and the making of contemporary India, right? When you wrote in 2002, there was no IPL.
Correct. Yeah.
IPL 15 years ago. 14, Aryan. 15. This is the 15th year.
Yeah.
So 2009. 2008.
16,
I can tell you one very culturally interesting thing. So at the India International Center, where I was staying, and Ricky Ponting, now the former Australian captain, now the coach of Delhi, was playing under Saurav Ganguly for Kolkata Knight Riders, Shah Rukh Khan's team. So while I was watching on television in the IIC annex, the staff had known me for very long. Sir, क्या ये सही है कि रिकी पॉन्टिंग सौरव गांगुली के अंडर खेल रहे हैं? Can it be true that Ricky Ponting, a white man, would be playing under Saurav Ganguly, a colored man, a man of, right? This was a very interesting comment. I said, yes. Kolkata Knight Riders, first year, is led by Saurav Ganguly. And Ricky Ponting comes at number 3, as he always does, for Australia. He's coming. Sir, ये तो बहुत बड़ी बात हो गई. It's a very big thing that has happened. Just the cultural commentary continued. So let's start with you, and then we'll come to Prerna, and we'll come to you. Let's start with you.
So thank you for the...
Please introduce yourself. We'll get to know you also. Yeah.
My name is Dr. Ramachandra. I'm a CEO of a small company called Dr. G.
I see.
So not as a economics major, but as an economics student, I'd like to challenge your statement that you said that the Indian system, the BCCI having this dominance is a bad thing. As an economics student, I would say that that's a good thing because they're doing it in a democratic way, in an open society, in a capitalistic system. So why is that a bad thing? And my second question.
Are you challenging or are you asking a question?
I mean, it's the same thing.
It's
right?
both. Why do you think it's? No, you asked a question, but tell me why. In your view,
Yeah.
why is it a good thing? And then.
I used to be like a Democrat, and then I did my PhD at NC State University, which is kind of like a very interesting place because it's both Democratic and Republican.
Yeah.
And I got introduced to a lot of Republican ideas of thinking about a small government.
I see.
And about because the U.S. government in the election system, it allows funding. Like you can openly give donations.
Right. So are you saying? Let me, in the interest of time, because we have only half an hour.
Sure.
Are you saying that this is a non-governmental or market-based entity called IPL,
Right.
and its growth is not based on government,
Yeah.
its growth is based on private initiative, and therefore it's a good thing?
Well, I understand that BCCI is a government institution. I understand that, and they're related to the government. But in terms of the growth of the IPL, I think it's something that the other sports can learn from.
Okay.
No, so you see, I was talking about how world cricket is done. By the way, there is nothing democratic about the functioning of BCCI. It's more secretive than any institution in India, and I've been part of it. So, okay. But more importantly, the international game. I'm saying how the international game is done. Everything has to suit the IPL calendar. First, secondly, since you're a Republican and you believe in freedom. Okay, you're an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur. You believe in freedom of movement, freedom of choice. Indian players can't play in other leagues, but other players can play in Indian leagues. You see, if you just see the
Business.
no, but it's a monopolistic business. It's bad. It's bad in the same way. So I think
We can improve the system.
no. Well, just try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, can I just add to that? It suits only India. Like, I'm from Pakistan, and
Yeah, exactly.
what's going on with the
I agree.
World Cup and Asian
Yeah, let's hear you. Yeah. You're from Pakistan, and what is your objection to IPL? Yeah.
No, I don't have an objection to IPL.
But it doesn't include
Yeah.
Pakistani players, so what?
They're allowed to play. That is my objection. If the league is going to take up half the calendar, especially
Yeah.
now it's expanding, it's really unfair to completely ban an entire country from playing.
I agree. I absolutely agree with that.
Secondly, my thing is more from the international perspective of the World Cup being held in India and then Pakistan having issues with visas and then Pakistan hosting the Asia Cup in India, refusing to play in Pakistan and us having to go to neutral venues and stuff like that. That's when it becomes really problematic.
There is no question about it. And the English is the same. They insisted in the way we are excluding Pakistan today, which is pernicious. The same way, the English would continue to play with the white-only South African team. So this is the history. Imperialism is bad. Period.
Now UAE has their own IPL.
No, that's fine. But
Indian players can't
first
play.
of all, IPL excluding Pakistani cricketers, some of whom are world beaters today and have always been, right? So after the first 3 years, I think. First 3 years were okay. First 2 years were okay. Secondly, the idea that the entire world cricket calendar today I heard Rob Key yesterday on BBC, who heads the ECB, who is the boss of English cricket and was a very good former player. On BBC yesterday, Rob Key said, he was commenting on IPL. He said there's absolutely no doubt that IPL is the center of world cricket today. And we in England, our white ball prowess, to quote him, our white ball prowess is wider and deeper than of any other country, which is also probably true. English white ball, right? Cricket, because they won the World Cup, 50 overs, they won the T20 World Cup, etc. But our attempt right now is to become second best to IPL. I'm quoting him.
Who said that again?
Rob Key, the boss of English Cricket Board, right? Our attempt right now is to become second best to IPL, and also he made a very interesting prediction now about your market.
Let's go to other questions.
Yeah. Yes, Miss.
Yeah.
Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Carolee. I'm a PhD student in the sociology department. So firstly, I have a different perspective in South Africa. People like to call the BCCI the America of cricket because of the way that they bully people in this way, and it's not just the IPL calendar. In South Africa, we basically can't play test cricket, right? Like that there's, in the next few years, there's almost no ability for the countries outside of the top three to play test cricket, and that has a really big impact on it. So my questions were in this vein. One is, I was listening to the Wisden Cricket podcast last week, I think it was, where they were saying that in order to save test cricket, we need a socialism for test cricket. That was the phrase that they used. And they said that India is lost to that cause. That if we're going to save test cricket, we need to have England and Australia. Like, do you agree with that? Is test cricket lost to India, and the role of...
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
So first, let me say something else about the way in which the IPL is pernicious. You talk about South Africa. And why did the brilliant wicketkeeper batsman Quinton de Kock retire from Test cricket? Because he wanted to make money in the IPL. Why do the West Indians retire early? So it drains talent from other countries, right? Now, will Test cricket survive? In some way, yes. A lot depends on the players. Now, Kohli much prefers Test cricket, but he may be not maybe some of the younger people. And for me, of course, for any lover, real lover of the game, Test cricket is pure. It's the most aesthetically satisfying. But I think again, this is a call that the BCCI has to make. I think money and greed, and in that sense you're right. It is like America disregards. The American government disregards international treaties it does not want to honor. The BCCI does the same thing with cricket. That's a good analogy. America. Yeah.
Aryan?
Yeah, my name's Aryan. I'm an undergrad student. I'm studying economics. So my question was actually, I don't think that Test cricket can ever die just because that's the pure form of the game, and the pure form of the game will always last. I think ODI cricket is more under threat with T20 and then the new advent of like the 100 in England and T10 cricket coming up in the UAE. But my question was actually, so the BCCI effectively runs the International Cricket Council, we can say. And I completely disagree with the IPL stance that Pakistani players aren't allowed to play, and then the World Cricket calendar revolves around the IPL. But it's a fact right now that all players in the world, like we just saw Trent Bolt just gave up his contract with New Zealand Cricket just to play T20 franchises. Chris Gayle did the same thing. AB de Villiers towards the end of his career was doing the same thing. How do we solve that problem?
And Joe Root has finally come.
Yeah.
Though he's not getting a chance in Rajasthan Royals.
Like Ben Stokes has said he won't play ODI cricket, he just wants to play Test cricket and T20 cricket. But the fact of the matter is that IPL offers more lucrative offers to cricketers. And how do we get that priority of playing for your nation over playing for a franchise?
See, I can't answer that question because I'm hopeless at prescription. But as a historian, there's a very interesting comparison to be made. Test cricket. I mean, many years ago I joked that Test cricket is to IPL as single malt is to the local hooch. But there's a better analogy more relevant to India. Test cricket is to T20 like Indian classical music is to film music.
Yeah.
Right. And so Indian classical music has to be nurtured, otherwise it'll go. And it's our greatest and purest art form. Actually, it's under threat, by the way. At least Hindustani classical music to some extent, I understand. So a way has to be found. And you may be right, Shane Warne, who was a brilliant thinker on the game, not just a great bowler, said, I think at least after second or third year of IPL, he said, one form has to die. And probably it'll be 20. But it'll take a lot of work. After Kohli, I don't know if the young kids who are making so much money in the IPL, whether they will have the same investment in Test cricket as people like Kohli do. I mean, I think it's unlikely. But I hope. But something has to be done. I mean, the BCCI can't see it. The BCCI can't see it. And like South Africa not getting any tests. India not encouraging other countries. So I mean, but I hope that.
Not only that, South Africa's T20 series in January until mid-February, all teams of South Africa are owned by Indian franchises. All teams.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's
Mumbai
right.
Indians are Cape Town Indians.
So it is imperialism. I mean,
Delhi,
the only word for it is
capital is
imperialism.
Pretoria capital, etc.
Yeah, Arvind.
The
Arvind,
US
you
also.
have one? Yeah, Arvind.
I had a different, but I think your analogy is incomplete in one respect, which is that unlike the hooch and the thing, and Hindustani and the thing, the game of cricket has been enhanced by IPL in some ways. The game, the five.
By white ball cricket, by 50-50.
Yeah, but
before
it's
IPL.
the faster version of the game. So I think that's the sense in
Yeah,
which.
yeah.
But the question I have for I'd like to know for others is that, as whatever democratization of cricket has happened in India, has writing on cricket also spread to the vernacular in ways that writing on cricket in English, there's been a kind of proliferation of authors writing on English in India, right? Not just internationally, and enrich the literature of cricket, right? Has that happened in vernacular as well?
So I think unlikely. Though in Bengali, yes. So there, for example, for a long time, Moti Nandi, who was a great Bengali short story writer, wrote a famous set of stories about club cricket in Kolkata called Nunuda Not Out. Right. So I think, but commentary, the interesting thing is you have commentary in every language.
Yes.
And I was the other day listening to Hindi commentary when we were playing our test series, and the Hindi commentators are more independent than the English commentators. Gavaskar and Shastri and company will never criticize the selection choice because they're worried about their contract with BCCI. But in Hindi they were saying, isko kyun khela, usko khela tha. Which is nice. I mean, you want that. By the way, so, you're talking about democracy and freedom of choice. To have commentators who are paid by the BCCI, they're propagandists. I mean, it is like, so I think these are some of the aspects, yes. But, but interestingly, but I say one thing about literature, since you mentioned. I have more or less retired from cricket writing. And people often ask me, because they have read some of my earlier books and they've liked it and they kept on. And the reason is, I grew up at a time when there was no television. So I had to recreate something that my reader had not seen. Today, cricket writing has to be technical, analytical. It can't be literary, and and so on. So it's a different kind of cricket writing that is emerging. And it's a very good cricket writing in English for sure. And of course, the great Gideon Haigh. I hope some of you read his books. Who's really the unacknowledged, the acknowledged, master of cricket writing. But I don't think there's much writing in Indian language. I suspect not. Yeah. Commentary, yes. Absolutely commentary, yes.
The commentary for Geo, for this IPL, is in 7 languages, including Malayalam. Right? So this is quite a development, and a market is driving it, right? Yeah. Market is that's driving it. So we expected, of course, Bengali. We expected Bengali, and we expected Tamil, but it's now Malayalam.
Telugu also.
Yeah.
Bhojpuri also.
Bhojpuri commentary also. Right? Yeah. Okay. So yes, go ahead. One second. Yeah.
What do you think India will look like in 2035?
What? Indian cricket, or this is a cricket seminar?
Oh, Indian cricket then.
Yeah. No. You come. Please keep coming to our seminars. We also talk about India 2035. Right now, the subject is Indian cricket.
Okay.
If you want to know, for example, why did Mahatma Gandhi never like cricket, he is the right person to ask. He is really the right person.
No, I've
can
read his
answer
book
that.
also.
Huh?
I've read his autobiography also.
Okay.
So yeah, that's fine. So I hope that I didn't know.
Can cricket ever break the barrier of being a Commonwealth sport?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. People have tried.
Yeah, I mean, it's
from
happening
Jagmohan
right now.
Dalmia's time, he wanted to take it to China and all that. Now, the US will be expats. I don't think it. I think it will go
There's
in.
no homegrown.
And India doesn't want it. Because, they want to be the hegemon.
But-
Which is how they play it.
History of the game does say that United States played cricket
Yes.
until the Civil War. Baseball is a post-Civil War development, and if you look at how it's described in technical books, baseball was seen as an outgrowth of cricket, and a simpler form, part of the American rebellion against the British complexity, aristocratic complexity.
Yeah, you had a question. Yeah, good.
I'm just to go on off of Aryan's point. I think the growth of the women's game, the growth of cricket itself, I think has splintered off into the men's game and the women's game. And in the women's game, we see a lot more of these non-Commonwealth countries coming forth.
Okay.
So Brazil,
Interesting.
Thailand,
How
all these
interesting.
They already have professional contracts for their teams. Their teams are properly professional,
Fantastic.
which it took like England, Australia so long to get there.
That's
They're
very interesting.
already there. And there's this thing that's actually coming to the US as well. It's called Fair Break Global. And it's basically like they take players from like 35 different countries and they like mix and match them into different teams, and they have 6 teams that play each other. So you have the best of the best. You have Indians, you have Australians, you have English players all playing with like people from Hong Kong, Nepal, Brazil, all of these things. It's a very
That's wonderful.
it's very fascinating to
But
look into.
not yet part of women's WPL, or were they in WPL also?
So the WPL was kind of like weird with the associate player rule,
Yeah.
but we had one player from the US. So we had Tara Norris playing. in
Yes,
the
yes,
WPL.
yes. I remember
Yes.
watching her. Right.
But she was the only one who was drafted.
Does Ram or do you have any thoughts on how it's revolutionizing women's cricket now?
WPL.
So once again 2 days I hear the BBC cricket
Yeah.
often, not every day, often.
Yeah.
So the cricket captain of women's team of England said, "I was paid £30,000 for 1 month of." The 100, which is their version of IPL, right? And I was paid 300,000 in India
Yeah.
for the same amount of time, 10 times as much. Why would this not revolutionize women's cricket?
It completely has. I mean, you talk about Trent Bolt and everybody retiring. You see that so much more in women's cricket now. So you have the South African captain, a couple of other batters who've completely just retired from the game to play leagues.
So what? Let me.
Yeah, no, I love women's cricket. You just gave me like a pain.
My question is a little different,
Yeah.
and it's not necessarily specifically on India, but I'm from Dehradun as well, and we obviously have the
Like
Afghan.
him.
Yes,
Ah.
and we have the Afghan national team.
Practicing there.
What is the influence that cricket teams have had on nationalism? Like you saw
No,
in
it,
Afghan.
they've intensified nationalism. For example, in our case, what I want to say also, what would India look like in 2035? A year or two before the IPL started, when T20 was beginning, and it was about 50-50, Mukul Keshavan, who's a wonderful Indian writer on politics and cricket, said that there should be a South Asia city-based league. So Sehwag plays for Multan, Tendulkar plays for Colombo, Wasim Akram plays for Bangalore. Now, if I had my way, that would be South Asian cricket in 2035, because that would transcend it. And I think otherwise this nationalism, at least India, it is true that to some extent, by bringing players from other countries, it's been good within India. But the exclusion of Pakistan is spiteful, vindictive, and deplorable. And I think peace in the subcontinent could actually come if you have a South Asian league. So I think that's what I would want in 2035.
If you watch cricket and you think that Babar Azam cannot be selected for any team in the world,
Yeah.
it's just it's
And Shaheen Shah Afridi.
or Shaheen Shah Afridi.
Yeah.
Today, cannot be selected. It's
Or Shadab Khan, yeah.
We have 5 minutes left. Let me collect questions now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Someone who hasn't asked. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, yes, I'm Atharv, I'm a freshman.
Yeah.
And I had a question about, what are your thoughts on fantasy cricket and, how it...
Fantasy cricket.
Yeah,
Okay.
and how it, affects the game, I guess, in one sense it definitely increases engagement, but, it also promotes, I guess, the shorter versions of the game.
I have no thoughts.
I don't know fantasy.
Like Team 11,
Betting.
What is it?
betting, predicting which player is going to do well so they
There's
get
a
a
lot of
score.
money.
and
Betting getting involved.
Not exactly betting, but predicting which player will do well, and then you get a certain amount of points and you beat your friends and then you put some money. It's
I
kind
see.
of like betting, but it's not exactly.
You have a question? No. Any questions from here?
Yeah.
Yes, miss. Go ahead.
I would love to also know about if it's not straying too much away from the context about the role of hockey in relation to what
Yeah,
you spoke
yeah.
about.
Look, so I think hockey is interesting. Again, there are many what ifs of cricket, and that historians are not supposed to ask. But in 1975, we won the World Cup. We were a very good team. We had the Indian hockey team won the World Cup. In 1980, India won the Olympics. And actually, in terms of skill, hockey may have been slightly better than cricket. And in terms of popularity, hockey was a little below cricket. In Pakistan too. There's some similarity, but Pakistan also had great hockey culture. Now, in 1983, there was a World Cup. Now, how many of you here have watched that clippings of that World Cup live? Clippings of that World Cup, not live, but recordings. 83 World Cup, okay. All of you remember Kapil Dev's catch?
Yes.
People think that was the turning point. That was not the turning point. The turning point was, and allow me to demonstrate, when Balwinder Sandhu bowled to Graham Greenwich, and he left it go, he thought it was an outswinger, and he hit the off stump. If he had played that ball, the match would have been over in 20 overs. Right. Now, once we won that, now what happened? This is a very interesting question, because we won the World Cup, total fluke. And even that was the year in which satellite television reached India. 83 victory was followed by 85 in Australia, which was not a total fluke, which was skill. And then cricket overtook hockey completely. So the public gaze went away from hockey. In 1980, we had the best team. By 83, cricket somehow won. So I think that World Cup victory coincided with the availability of satellite television in every Indian home, bringing Kapil and Gavaskar and later, of course, Tendulkar and that whole crowd, Kumble and Lakshman and Dravid and the whole crowd. I think so. There's been some attempts to revive hockey. By the way, there was a Premier Hockey League in which Pakistanis played. And I remember the first Premier Hockey League was won by a team from Hyderabad, which had a fantastic Pakistani goalkeeper. Right. So it's sad. I think this overwhelming dominance of cricket, it's just unfortunate.
I grew up in small towns of UP. As a child, I thought field hockey was, though I was drawn to cricket as a child, field hockey was much more popular. Hockey was much more popular than cricket in the UP small towns where I grew up. Yes. To conclude with a very happy thought in some ways, and we, the social scientists, have to figure this out. This is happening at a pretty large level. Meenu, the woman who was picked to play for Delhi in the Women's Premier League, is a daily wage laborer's daughter from Kerala and a tribal. Right? The interview she has given, Kerala, even daily wage laborers can speak some English. It's not just Malayalam. You should watch that and hear that. It is quite an interview about her childhood, about teenage, and how she was picked by Delhi Capitals under Meg Lanning, who is a superstar of cricket, Australia's captain. Right? So something very remarkable is happening at the ground level about what cricket is doing to aspirations, not only of the middle class, but also people like Meenu. Right? And we need to pay attention to that. This will be, of course, great for fiction, etc., something like this. But also, I think social sciences have to start paying attention to sports of this kind. Right? On that note, let's thank...
By the way, there's a very good book by younger social scientist, Vidya Subramanian. She's written a first-rate book on technology in cricket, which OUP just published. The use and misuse of technology in cricket. So there's some very good literature now coming out by younger scholars.
Time to thank Ram for this very unusual seminar and very thoughtful reflections.